This is De Bello Gallico, Book 5, Chapter 43. The Gauls have just begun to really step up their attack and prepare all sorts of things for the Romans. And we're going to read about what happens next. So, I've got my book open because you should always be translating with your book to look for vocab and any notes that are in the book. So, Septimo abpugnationis die, on the 7th day of the attack, of the siege. Then we have an ablative absolute, maximo coorto vento. And this explains why they're doing the next part. There's a really big wind, and these are all words that we've never seen before. These are not words that are in any of the other Cambridge books. So, we have ferventes fusili ex argilla gandes, which are all weird things. Okay, so fusili describes the argilla, and ferventes describes the glandes. And ferventes glandes is the accusative that goes with the very last part of this sentence, iacere coiperunt. They began to throw. And then we have an ablative fundis. This is how they threw them, with slings. And they began to throw. So we have another accusative. This is accusative neuter plural. Ferve facta iacula. And they were throwing them in casas. Now, you're probably familiar with the word casa in Spanish, means house. In Latin, domus or villa means house. A casa is a hut, or like a tent. It's smaller and less permanent than a house. And so here it's referring to the military barracks, their quarters for the men. And so the Gauls are using the wind and the fact that everything is made from wood, and as we're going to see later in the next part, straw, to burn down the Roman camp. So into the huts, which more Gallico, which is an ablative of manner, stramentis erant tectae. And we've seen tecta a lot as a noun. This is the verb to cover. So they were covered with stramentis, as straw. So, like you've seen probably in a lot of old pictures, they have thatched roofs that are easily flammable. And it's funny because what Caesar's telling us is the Romans have built their casae in the Gaulish manner, like in the Gaelic manner, like Gauls do. And the Gauls are waging war like the Romans do. So each side is kind of doing things in a manner that's unaccustomed, that they're unaccustomed to. So, hi, which refers to the casae, celeriter ignem comprehenderunt. And we have the same idiom in English and in Latin. They caught fire, which if you think about it doesn't make sense. You don't catch fire. And in Britain they say go on fire, which is funny. At venti magnitudine in omnem locum castrorum distulerunt. So venti here is our nominative, and the winds distulerunt. And we're going to have this idea of ignem again. We saw it in the first section of the sentence. They spread, well, what did they spread? Fire. And then magnitudine, by their size. So the winds are so big that it spreads the fire easily. And it spreads it in omnem locum castrorum, of the camp. The hostes maximo clamore sicuti parta iam atque explorata victoria torres testudinesque agere et scalis valum ascendere coiperunt. So we just had the word coiperunt. They began to do something. And here we have it again. The subject is hostes at the very beginning. So the hostes began, because that would be perfect tense. And then we have maximo clamore, with a very big shout. And here we have a kind of simile, sicuti, but it's a simile that has an ablative absolute, like with a noun having been verbed. So just as if, with victory having been parted already and explorated, they begin, and then there's two infinitives. Begin takes a complementary infinitive. We have agere and ascendere. And agere, like we've talked about, means verb. It takes its meaning from the nouns around it. So when you're talking about military things, and there's a note in your book, military works, it says move forward or advance. So they began to advance, torres testudinesque, and they began to ascendere, the wallum, with stairs, or with ladders, which is scalis. Scale comes from this, right? To scale a mountain, like to go up a ladder, and musical scales to go up step by step. Alright, so it looks like the enemy is just about to sort of break into the walls, right? They have their sheds, their tortoises, right? Their towers, their ladders, and they are feeling very confident. Ac tanta militu virtus atque ea praesentia animi fuit. But so great. And then remember, virtus has the word man in it, but it's a feminine word. It means manly excellence, but tanta is feminine and goes with virtus. So great, and then fuit's our verb, was the courage, let's say, or bravery, manly excellence of the soldiers. And anyway, understand so great. So great, the presence of mind. That. So we have a result here with tanta. So great was one thing that the result was cum undique flamma erentur. So we have a cum clause here. We have an imperfect subjunctive. When on all sides they were being burned by flame. And it's passive because of the tor at the end. And maxima telora multitudine premerentur, another imperfect subjunctive. They were being pressed by a very great crowd of weapons, or spears, missiles. And suaque omnia impedimenta atque omnes fortunas confligrari intellegerent, another imperfect subjunctive. And they knew that all their own things, all their own baggage, and all their fortunes to burn. And this is an indirect statement. They knew that all their baggage and all their fortunes, let's see, property is one thing you can say for fortunes, was burning. So this is the Romans, right? They're starting to burn, they're pressed by weapons. But so great was their presence of mind that non modo demigrare causa de vallo discendere nemo. And nemos are nominative, and it's kept to the very end, which is very emphatic. Non modo, not only, and then we have a said, but this is sort of also, not only did no one decedere, leave de vallo, from the ramparts, demigrandi causa, it's a gerund, but paene ne respiceret quidem quisquam, and the ne and the quidem together is not even. And so, but almost not, he was looking back, even anyone. But not even anyone almost was looking back. Sort of looking at his things and wishing he had been there to save them. So no one deserted, and almost no one looked back. Ac tum omnes acerime fortissime quae pugnaret. And then all were fighting very harshly and very bravely. Hic dies nostris longe gravissimus fuit. Hic dies is our nominative. This day, fuit was gravissimus. Very heavy, very serious, very difficult. Nostris, for our men. Longe, by far. So you can say like the most difficult, the most serious. This day was the most serious for our men by far. Sed tamen, but however, hunc habuit eventum. And hunc and eventum are accusatives, but it had this outcome. Ut, that. That on that day, AODA, so it's an ablative of time when, maximus numerus hostium vulneraretur. Another passive. It's also an imperfect subjunctive in this result clause. But however, it had the effect, or it had the outcome that the result was, on that day, the greatest number of soldiers were wounded and were killed. Did I say soldier? I meant of the enemy. Greatest number of the enemy. So things are going very poorly for the Romans, but they're so brave, and they no one deserts. No one is worried about their things, unlike Sabinus and Cotta. So therefore, they were able to kill and wound very many. Ut se sub ipsa vallo constipaverant recusumque primis ultimi non debant. That they had constipaverant, which is where we get the word constipation. They had crowded themselves sub ipsa vallo, under that, and this is talking about the enemy, that they had crowded themselves under the rampart itself and were not giving, non dabant, and the ultimi is the subject, the last one. So these are the people on the back. So imagine like a porch, and they're all trying to crowd underneath it. And the people in the back, the last people in, are not giving a recusum to the primis, which are the first people in. Paulum quidem intermissa flamma, and then so intermissa flamma is a nice little ablative absolute, and paulum goes with it. It's an adverb a little bit. So with the flame having indeed been sent between a little, it's like having died down a little. Et quodam locitori ad acta et contingente valum, and to that certain place, the tower, and this is sort of been thrust and touching the rampart. So this is the tower of the enemies, is touching the rampart of the Romans. Tertii cohortis centurionis, the centurions of the third cohort. Ex ao quo stabant loco recesserunt. And this ao of ex ao goes with the loco, from that place. Recesserunt, they retreated. They retreated from that place where they were standing. So quo is an ablative of place where. So that sounds bad, except it's good. Suos quae omnes removerunt. And they removed suos omnes, all their own men. Again, sounds bad. It's really good. Nutu vocibusque hoste si introrire velent vocare coeperunt. So again, this is the third or fourth time we've seen coeperunt. They began Wolkare to call Hostes, the enemy. And then there's this great Nutu Wokibusque. Nutus is a nod. With a nod and with voices, or so with words, or like with calls. The book says cries or shouts. So they're like making signs at them, like body signs, like come at me, bro. And they're also calling to them. Si introire wellent. So introire, which is hard to say, is really intro and ire, to come inside. If they wanted to come inside. So they began to call, do you want to come inside? Come on in. It's like, come at me, bro. Quorum progredi alsus est nemo. So quorum refers back to the enemy. It refers back to the Hostes, of whom nemo, no one, alsus est, dared. And then progredi is infinitive in its deponent, so it looks passive, but it's not, to go forward. So they're basically playing mind games with the enemy. They're saying, yeah, come on, come at me. And they're like, no, you go first. No, you go first. No one wants to go in. Tum ex omnibus parte lapidus conjectis disturbati torisque sucenta est. And then, having been disturbed, and then we have an appellative lapidibus conjectis, with rocks or stones having been hurled ex omni parte, from every part. Make sure it stays singular. Torisque sucenta est, and the tower was burned. And so it's kind of a delay tactic. So they get them to slow down enough, and then they burn their tower down. And then the Romans don't have to worry about them coming over the tower. So that it works out for them perfectly.